Okay, so I haven't done one of these in a while, but I wanted to do one today because I had an interesting discussion with a previous neighbor of mine who's a bit out there. He's on fringe society. He listens to Coast to Coast. He believes that we're all being poisoned with chemtrails. He believes that the government is inherently evil, um, and that people are doomed, basically. So he's quite pessimistic, but his comments on chemtrails got me thinking. Um, so if you don't know what chemtrails are, I'm sure most of you do. Chemtrails are the idea that some entity, probably the federal government or some extremely large corporation, or the idea that the federal government and large corporations are basically inseparable, are um, adulterating jet fuel with toxins, poisons, and they're spreading them across the country. And the evidence, of course, is the giant streaks of clouds in the sky that follow after jets appear and disappear. And they believe that within those clouds there are neurotoxic chemicals that dumb us down, make us more complacent, um, or I would think that wouldn't make too much sense, but more consumerist. I think if anything, a government or a corporation would want to poison us so that we consume more, we get more hungry, or we have a feeling that we need to buy anything. Anyway, I don't believe chemtrails exist. I believe they have been tested. I believe that they are totally possible, but I don't believe that there's any entity doing that to the general population. So, beyond that, I was wondering, why is chemtrails a thing? Why does anyone even begin to think that that exists? Why, um, what is the impetus for saying, well, chemtrails exist? And well, the idea is that we are too complacent. Why haven't we rebelled yet? Or why are we stupid? Or why are we apathetic? So the issue is, why are we apathetic? Why don't we rebel against this tyrannical government? And um, firstly, I think it's important to realize that the issue is not how we are, it's how we aren't. It's a problem of what we aren't doing. So we are not taking action against something. And thus, why aren't we taking action? We have to externalize it. It's an external problem. I can't be to blame. I can't be the issue. It must be something in my environment infecting me, something as far away and distant as possible, something that I possibly cannot control myself. So it takes away the guilt or the responsibility of myself taking action. It externalizes the issue, and it's eventually a victim mindset. And the victim mindset is based on fear, and fear is addicting, which is why people like the news, which is why people listen to fringe science and conspiracy theories. Fear is addicting, fear gets viewership, and thus the more fear you can propagate, the more viewers you get, and the more income you get from advertisements. What a crazy coincidence. So, but deeper than that is, so we have this victim mentality. We have this victim mentality. Um, but parallel to that, the issue at hand, the reason why we don't rebel, is not because we're being subjected to neurotoxic soups, it's because of our evolutionary advantage. It's because of the magnificence of the human brain. And what is both a blessing is also a curse in this instance, because the brain normalizes. So the reason that people aren't exploding with anger because of corruption in the government and ties to government and corporations being held higher than the individuals, the lack of concern for consumerist health, the lack of concern for consumerist safety, the lack of concern for education for all. These are all issues that should concern us and should bring about some action, some revolt. The severity or the extremity of it, I can't really say what it should, but something should happen where we attempt to change these things other than just discussing it on Facebook. The normalization that gets us here is that it occurs over long periods of time, and that time is the strength of ailments such as this. This is why people get into toxic relationships and stay in them. It's if you took the first day of such a relationship, usually the two couple feel great. They feel wonderful. They're so glad to have met each other. They like each other's company. They feel safe with one another. Fast forward 10 years, maybe they've been married for 5 years or something, and they fight every day. They get angry about dishes. They get angry about bills. They get angry about who took the car last or whatever, and they're bitter. They're angry. Why don't they split up? If that lasts, that day of 10 years where every time they're arguing and fighting, if you took that and placed it in day 2, these two would not date. They would not see each other. It would be ridiculous to go on a second date with, or a third date with, somebody who is obstructive to who you are, to be fighting all the time, to be violent, and generally to make you feel not good, right? So it's the same situation here. We're not in a relationship with our government or the economic model. It's that it surrounds us and it changes ever so slowly, and these changes aren't necessarily controlled by a mastermind group or a single person or the Illuminati. These are slow changes that just happen. It's just like the stock market. You cannot predict the stock market. You can say where it might go or general trends of things, but stock market crashes happen. We can't predict these things. We can't predict the government. We can't predict economic models. They change extremely slowly, subtly over time, sometimes dramatically, but for the most part, everything happens quite slowly and at such a rate that we do not defy it, we do not aggravate it, we do not resist it. And that is organically how it's always going to be, because if things happen against our normalization potential, if things happen too quickly for us to normalize to them, then we revolt. Then it says, no, we can't do this. And people understand that. So lawmakers will not make a law tomorrow that all guns are banned, or that everyone is required to chop their testicles off, or everyone has to stop eating meat. Everyone knows that these things are far too fast for our normalization. However, small changes can be made. So our course of history gets driven in different directions, and there's no major revolt. There's no our course of history is not a zigzag. It's slopes and maybe a turn here and sloping onwards, and that is due to the fact that the majority of our surroundings are governed by people. People are generally the same in how they normalize and what they are capable of withstanding without revolting or becoming anxious or stressed about a subject to the point of not coping with it. And so here we are with things that when we look back 5 years, or when we really realize where we're at, they're terrible. They can be disgusting. If you look over LA and you wonder how the hell it got this way, it's just a brown cloud of smog some days, and cars going aimlessly to destinations that are probably worthless for that individual and probably detrimental to their life. They're just consuming materials, they're getting away from people, they're going towards whatever. It doesn't really matter what's going on. But if you look at LA, suddenly you realize that we've normalized a perverse behavior of humanity. And we normalize it because we are in our house and we like our house. Houses aren't perverted things really, but then you realize that there's a house next to you that's the same, and the normalization tells you, well, they're just like me, they like their house. But then you realize there's 10 houses surrounding you, there's 100 houses surrounding that, there's 1,000 houses surrounding that, there's 10,000 around that, there's 1,000,000 around that. And then you have tens of millions of houses, roads, buildings, all scattered across this land, because there's no point, there's never going to be a point where you say, okay, that's too many houses, this is too many roads, this is too many trees being cut down, because it's an arbitrary line. And we have to normalize. We can't organically say that 35,000 houses for every 50 acres or 200 acres, that's the limit. Why is that the limit? Why isn't it 34,000? Why isn't it 36,000? We can't say these things, and if you gave it a number, 35,000 houses for every 200 acres, in 100 years someone would say, well, we need more room, we're going to have to make 36, and everyone would be, okay, that's fine, because they normalized to 35. 36 is not a big difference. So we create these problems, and the reason that we don't revolt, even in the face of waking up to the monstrosity that we've created, we can't face the idea that we've been cognizant of this the entire time. We can't face the idea that we went from point A to point B without doing anything, when the quality of life has dramatically shifted downward. We can't say that we were once here and we went here willingly, cognizantly, consciously. So somewhere from here to here, we believe something is happening to us. We want to externalize that problem. Chem Trails, fluoride in our water, chemicals in our food making us stupider, biased education, so on and so forth. The information is there. We're still totally able, possibly willing to revolt, to change things. Whether or not we do is up to us.